there will be times when the standard default Blender interface won't be working for you. So what we can do is we can actually create our own presets and create our own custom layouts within a scene so that you can work as efficiently as possible. So we have this scene which is using the default layout, and let's go ahead and start modifying it. But before we start modifying it too much, I actually want to create a new preset. So let me show you why I want to do this. So, let's say for example we kind of mess around with the scene a little bit and I kind of make this bigger and open up this panel. What happens is no matter what changes you make to this layout, it actually saves it in whichever preset you have available. So I'd made these changes to default, and if I go into for example animation, you can see it completely changes, but when I come back to default, those changes are still there. So whatever changes we make, actually still wind up in whatever preset we have up there. So I'm going to do ahead and put this back and resize these windows down and put it back to pretty much the default interface. And before we start really drastically reconfiguring this interface, I'm going to create a new preset, and so that way I can keep my default pretty pristine. In that way can always come back to that default setting. So all I'm going to do is hit the plus sign here, and what that does is it just takes whichever view you are in, makes a copy of it and makes another preset. So if I do the scroll down here, I have default and default.001. Any changes I make to default.001 will stick there, and then when I go back to default, it will go back to that original one. So let's go to default.001 and start doing some changes. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this Object Tools panel and scale it down, so I have a full user perspective window. There are a lot of times you're going to want to have more than one view into the scene. We can do this by doing the quad view, but there are also ways of creating your own custom layouts, and let's show you how to do that. If you notice, each one of these windows has a little kind of a crosshatch in the top right corner. So we have little kind of diagonal crosshatch here and here. We can use this to actually split our windows. So if I left click and drag, I can split window. So in this case, I'm going to split this window vertically. So I'm going to left click here and drag to the last, and you see as I do that it creates a second window. Each one of windows is unique. So, if I pan in this user perspective window, this one doesn't get affected. I can also change each window to whatever view I want. So for example, if I want to change it to orthographic, I can do that. If I want to, I can also change it to a top view just by hitting the number 7 on the number pad. I also can split them horizontally. So if I left click and drag down, I split the window again. So I have 3 views here. So let's go ahead and change this top view here to a right view. You can also create floating windows. So, if I position my cursor above this icon here, hold down the Shift key and drag, you'll see that it actually creates a floating window that I can also use. This might not be as useful for viewports, but it's very useful for things like the Properties panel. So if I take the Properties panel, Shift and drag, you can see I've detached this Properties panel here. This is great if you're using multiple monitor setups and you want to have floating palettes on one monitor and your viewport on another. So basically, you can just shift drag and take your outliner and your properties panel and just put them into another monitor. So this can be very handy for that. I'm going to go ahead and close this. Once we have our layout the way that we want, we can rename it. Right, we've been working with this as default.001. But if we want, we can give it a more descriptive name. So, all I have to do is left click in there and type in the name. So I'm going to call this 3 view because it's 3 windows here. And I've changed the name of that preset, so if I click here you can see I have tree view and I can go back to my default and I can go back to try view. We can also collapse windows. Okay, we've actually added a bunch of new panels here, but we can actually get rid of those basically using the same method we used to create them. So, all I have to do is again, left click on this icon here, and if I drag up instead of down, it basically creates this arrow that you can see, and when I let go, it collapses one window into another. So, if I want to collapse this view here, I have to start here and left click and drag to the right instead of the left, and you can see how it basically expands that window. Any change that I've made to this will show up in this 3 view preset. So if I go to my default here, I still have that, but if I go to my try view, then that basically stays. So again, try to name them descriptively, and then if you're going to do a drastic change, create a new preset. All of these presets actually save with the scene. If you want, you can save preferences and it will save all of your defaults as well. So this will give you a lot more flexibility in how you arrange and organize your workflow in Blender.